Okay, so you ready to dive in? Today, we're going deep on Edgar Cayce,
Oh, yeah.
the sleeping prophet.
Big topic.
Yeah, and I bet you're here because you've at least heard the name.
Mm-hmm.
Right, maybe you know him for the past live stuff or those wild predictions about the planet changing.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got some really interesting stuff today that goes way beyond just those readings into some of the theories and, frankly, the controversies that surround this guy.
Lots of them.
Right. So, our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the core ideas driving these Cayce conspiracy theories.
The evidence people bring up.
All that. And, of course, the counter-arguments. We got to stay balanced here. Our goal is to help you understand it all, not to tell you what to think.
Exactly. And it's worth remembering, this guy, he produced a ton of material.
Thousands.
Thousands of readings covering, pretty much everything you can think of. So when we say conspiracy theories, we're talking about a whole set of ideas about hidden knowledge and suppressed truths. And it all somehow links back to Cayce.
Okay, so let's break this down then. One of the big things you always hear with these theories is this idea of a suppressed truth.
Right.
When it comes to Edgar Cayce, what exactly does that even mean?
So basically, it's this belief that the full extent of Cayce's abilities and just how accurate his readings were has been deliberately hidden
By someone.
by someone or some group, right? And they usually point fingers at, the usual suspects.
Thank you.
Governments, maybe they don't want certain things getting out. The medical establishment, they could be resistant to his ideas because, let's be honest, some of them were pretty out there. Oh, and you can't forget religious groups. Some of his stuff might clash with their, traditional beliefs.
Makes sense. It's a classic story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Someone powerful keeping secrets from the rest of us.
Sure.
And with Cayce, a big part of that secret is his readings about those lost civilizations. Especially Atlantis.
Oh, yeah, Atlantis, it just grabs you, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Why do you think people are so fascinated by this idea of Atlantis?
Well, you've got this idea of a lost golden age, back then, their knowledge, their technology, maybe it was way more advanced than anything we have today. And what if some of that knowledge is still out there?
Waiting to be rediscovered.
Exactly. And the conspiracy part comes in because some people believe that this knowledge, even maybe pieces of their tech, are being hidden on purpose.
Kept from us.
Yeah, deliberately kept from us. Who knows why, right? But it really makes you think, what if there's more to human history than we know?
Right. And closely tied to that is the Hall of Records in Egypt.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
Sounds like something out of Indiana Jones, right? Like, what's the story with this Hall of Records?
Well, according to Cayce, there's this actual place, a hidden chamber somewhere in Egypt.
With everything.
Yeah, supposedly it has a complete record of human history. All the secrets, all the achievements of those lost civilizations. It's like the ultimate history book buried somewhere in the desert.
And the conspiracy.
The conspiracy is that people believe this hall is real and that finding it has been, actively stopped by someone.
By someone, yeah. They think powerful forces are working to make sure this knowledge never sees the light of day.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild idea.
Yeah.
But it's definitely intriguing.
It is. It is. Now, things get a little more serious when we start talking about the Earth changes, predictions.
Yes, the prophecies.
Rising sea levels, land masses shifting. It's definitely stuff we're worried about today. How does this play into the whole conspiracy thing?
The belief is that these warnings, all the stuff that Cayce was talking about, decades ago, it's all accurate.
And that we're ignoring it.
And that we're ignoring it.
Yeah.
That people in charge know this is happening but aren't doing anything about it. Maybe to avoid panic, maybe for economic reasons, who knows. But the point is, they believe these warnings were real and that they've been, swept under the rug.
And some people point to current events, right, like hurricanes and earthquakes and stuff, as proof that Cayce was right.
That's right. It's like they're looking for evidence in the headlines, It's like, see, he said this would happen, and look, it's happening. It's a powerful connection to make. Now, Cayce also spoke a lot about reincarnation and past lives. How does that fit into the overall conspiracy narrative?
Well, for some people, these readings are seen as hard proof that there's a deeper spiritual reality out there.
That we're not fully aware of.
Yeah, a reality that mainstream science, even traditional religions, aren't willing to accept. It's not so much about someone actively hiding information, but more like a general unwillingness to acknowledge this, fundamental aspect of being human.
Makes sense. And then there's the healing abilities. aspect. Cayce's medical readings a lot of times suggested some pretty unusual treatments.
They did, didn't they?
So what's the conspiracy angle on this one?
The idea here is that Cayce's successes with these readings, using holistic methods and all that, shows that there's a more effective way to heal that's being suppressed.
Like a better way that's being kept secret.
Exactly. And the finger often gets pointed at, big pharma, because, they make a lot of money from conventional medicine. So the story goes that they're actively working to keep these alternative methods hidden because it threatens their profits.
So like a whole system is rigged against us, right?
And in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a story that resonates with a lot of people who are, distrustful of big institutions.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the main idea behind these Cayce conspiracy theories is that his readings are full of this secret knowledge about history, health, the planet, even spirituality.
And that powerful groups are trying to keep it all hidden.
Right. It's a fascinating and honestly a little bit unsettling line of thought. Now, let's shift gears a bit and look at the evidence people often use to support these theories.
Right.
One of the things that comes up a lot is just the sheer volume of readings Cayce produced.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
How is that considered evidence?
Well, the argument is that having such a massive amount of work covering so many topics suggests that there had to be some real source of, extraordinary information behind it.
Like it couldn't all just be random guesses or coincidences?
Right. If he was making stuff up, you'd think there'd be more inconsistencies or contradictions. But the fact that there are patterns, recurring themes, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And then there are those stories you hear about his medical readings being super accurate.
Oh, yeah, the anecdotes.
People claiming he diagnosed their illnesses when doctors couldn't, or that he suggested treatments that actually worked.
And these stories, they're really powerful, because they're personal, they're emotional. And for the people who experience these things, it's proof positive that Cayce had a real gift.
Right. It's hard to argue with someone's lived experience, even if it's not, scientific proof.
Exactly. And the fact that these stories persist, that they get passed down and shared, it just adds to the mystique,
It keeps the legend alive. And speaking of keeping things alive, the fact that we're still talking about Cayce's predictions so many years later, that's got to count for something, right?
Absolutely. I mean, why else would we be having this conversation right now? The continued interest in his prophecies, the feeling that some of them, even the vague ones, might be coming true, it all reinforces the idea that he had genuine foresight.
Right. And sometimes it feels like the vaguer the prediction, the easier it is to find something that fits,
That's true. That's true. But for believers, any perceived accuracy just strengthens their conviction that Cayce was onto something real.
Now, when it comes to claims about information related to Cayce being suppressed, what kind of things do people usually allege?
Well, these claims often center around rumors or interpretations of, obscure statements.
Like whispers and hints?
Yeah, like there were certain readings that were intentionally kept secret, maybe altered or downplayed.
By who, though?
Well, it could be the folks in charge of Cayce's records or maybe outside groups that felt threatened by the information. But it's important to remember that these are often just suspicions, not hard evidence of a cover-up.
Okay, that's important to keep in mind. And what about the Hall of Records? It hasn't been found yet, right? How do believers interpret that?
The lack of discovery actually strengthens their belief. It's like, see, if it was easy to find, they would have found it by now.
So they see it as proof that it's being hidden.
Exactly. It reinforces that whole idea of a powerful group actively working to keep this incredible knowledge from us.
Interesting. And finally, there's the whole thing about people seeing current natural disasters as confirmation of Cayce's Earth change predictions.
Oh, yeah, this one's a bit tricky.
Right. It's tempting to connect the dots, but are we just seeing patterns where they don't exist?
It's definitely something to be careful about. Yes, we're seeing more frequent and intense natural disasters these days, but to say they're happening solely because of what Cayce predicted, well, that's a pretty big leap.
It is. There are scientific explanations for these events, right?
Absolutely. And it's important to consider those. Maybe any apparent match with Cayce's predictions is just coincidence.
Or because his predictions were so broad, they could fit a lot of different situations.
Exactly. It's easy to look back and say, see, he was right. But you have to be careful about cherry-picking evidence to fit a narrative.
That's a good point. Okay, now let's dive into the counter-arguments.
Let's do it.
The folks who are skeptical of these Cayce theories. And the biggest one, of course, is the lack of scientific verification.
That's the big one, isn't it?
Right. I mean, these readings were given in a trance state, often dealing with things that aren't exactly measurable by science.
That's right. And there's no real way to replicate those conditions or test his claims in a controlled environment. So for people who are looking for hard evidence, it's just not there.
And what about the idea that the power of suggestion, or the placebo effect, could explain why some people felt better after a Cayce reading?
That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
We know that the mind can have a powerful effect on the body.
If you believe something will work, it might actually work, even if there's no real, medical reason for it.
Exactly. And Cayce's readings were often very detailed and personal. He showed genuine care for the people he was reading for, so it's possible that just that experience, that sense of hope and being listened to, could have contributed to their improvement.
Right. It's not necessarily proof of some mystical healing power.
It could just be the power of positive thinking.
And the fact that many of Cayce's prophecies were pretty general, that's another criticism you hear a lot.
Oh yeah, the vagueness.
It's like they could be interpreted to fit a lot of different events after the fact.
Exactly. It's like throwing a dart at a board that's already full of holes. You're bound to hit something eventually.
Right. And then you can say, see, he predicted it. But was it a genuine prediction or just a lucky guess?
That's the question, isn't it?
Skeptics also question Cayce's trance states, suggesting that maybe it was just self-hypnosis,
Yeah, like he was accessing his own subconscious mind.
but not actually getting information from some external source.
Exactly. And if you look at the content of his readings, they often reflect the beliefs and ideas that were prevalent at the time.
So it's possible that his subconscious was just, spitting back what he had already absorbed from the world around him.
It's a possibility, for sure. And then, of course, there's the lack of physical evidence.
For things like Atlantis and the Hall of Records.
Despite years of searching and countless expeditions, there's no concrete proof that these things actually exist.
No ruins, no artifacts, no nothing.
And for a lot of people, that's a deal breaker. If you can't point to any tangible evidence, it's hard to take the claim seriously.
And finally, there's this idea that humans are just really good at seeing patterns, even where they don't exist.
Oh, we love patterns, don't we?
We do. So when it comes to Cayce's predictions, it's possible that people are just connecting the dots in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs.
Even if the connections are weak or totally coincidental.
Right. It's something to be mindful of, for sure. Now, before we wrap things up, I think it's really interesting to consider the psychological and social reasons why people are still so drawn to Edgar Cayce and these conspiracy theories. Why do you think this stuff still resonates with the people today?
Well, for starters, there's the appeal of the mysterious. Humans are naturally curious, and we're drawn to things we don't understand. Anything that hints at hidden knowledge or secret powers, it just piques our interest.
It makes us want to know more.
Exactly. And then there's the desire for hope and healing. A lot of people are dealing with health problems, either personally or with loved ones.
And Cayce offered a different approach, right?
He did. A more holistic, natural approach that appealed to people who were maybe disillusioned with conventional medicine.
Or looking for something more than just pills and surgery.
Right. And his readings offered hope, even if it wasn't always grounded in, solid scientific evidence.
And what about the fear of, global catastrophe?
Yeah.
Cayce's predictions about Earth changes. It seems like that taps into a lot of the anxieties we have today.
Absolutely. Climate change, natural disasters, it's all over the news. And Cayce's predictions, even though they were made decades ago, they speak to those fears in a very direct way.
It's like he's giving us a framework for understanding and maybe even preparing for the worst.
And for some people, that's comforting, even if it's a bit scary.
Yeah, I can see that. And then there's the whole distrust of authority thing.
Hmm.
Do you think that plays a role in why people believe these theories?
I think it plays a huge role. We live in a world where a lot of people are skeptical of governments, corporations, the media.
It's like a default setting for some folks.
And when you have that mindset, it's easy to believe that information is being suppressed, especially if it challenges the status quo.
So Cayce becomes a symbol of truth-telling in the face of powerful forces trying to silence him.
Exactly. And finally, you can't ignore the influence of the New Age movement. Cayce's ideas about spirituality, reincarnation, alternative healing.
It all fits right in with New Age thinking.
It does. And the New Age movement has been incredibly influential, especially in the last few decades. So it's no surprise that Cayce's work continues to find a receptive audience within that community.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's not just about one guy and his readings. It's about all the different ways those readings intersect with our hopes, our fears, our beliefs about the world.
Right. Okay, so we've explored a lot of ground here today. We've looked at the core tenets of the Cayce conspiracy theories, the evidence that's often cited, the counter-arguments, and the psychological and social factors that keep these ideas alive.
It's been a deep dive, for sure.
It has. And as always, we've tried to present this information objectively without endorsing any particular viewpoint.
Letting you draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Go for it.
We've talked a lot about the desire for understanding the unknown and how that plays into the fascination with Edgar Cayce. But what about the flip side of that? The need for critical thinking, for questioning what we hear and see.
That's crucial, isn't it?
It is, because ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we believe, what we accept as truth. And in a world where information, both accurate and inaccurate, is constantly bombarding us.
It's more important than ever to develop those critical thinking skills.
To ask questions, to weigh the evidence, to be discerning, because the truth, as they say, is out there.
But it's not always easy to find.
Exactly. So keep searching, keep questioning, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.